After reading this module, you shall be able to gain an insight about MNEs from the developing economies. Understand the various push factors behind the internationalization of the MNEs from developing countries. Identify the theoretical backgrounds to understand the behavior of the MNEs from developing countries. Analyze the recent trends in growth of MNEs from the developing countries. The discourse about the performance and the role of the MNEs is generally focused on the MNEs from the developed economies, who in order to maximize their profits and sales follow their market seeking and efficiency seeking strategies and expand their operations in the developing country. However, we can observe many enterprises from the developing countries are also internationalizing their operations. Actually, since the 1990s, the global competitive landscape is becoming increasingly populated by MNEs originating from countries that are not among the most advanced in the world. The new MNEs come from upper middle income economies, emerging economies, developing economies, as well as the oil-rich countries. They are operating in the international market sphere through alliances and joint ventures or even wholly owned subsidiaries. Some of them are small and product focused, while others are large and even diversified across many industries. They are being categorized as third world multinationals or emerging multinationals. Recently, these enterprises have become key actors in foreign direct investment and cross-border acquisitions. During the recent phase of global slowdown, the MNEs from the developing countries have increased their share in world FDI flows, while that of the developed world declined. Recent World Investment Report of 2015 pointed out that global FDI inflows declined in 2014. Global foreign direct investment, that is FDI inflows, fell by 16% to $1.23 trillion in 2014, mostly because of the fragility of the global economy. But investments by developing country multinational enterprises, that is MNEs, reached a record level, and the developing Asia now invests abroad more than any other region. 9 of the 20 largest investor countries were from developing or transition economies. These MNEs continue to acquire developed country foreign affiliates in developing world, but it is also being felt that the MNEs from the developing economies have fewer experiences of global markets, weak technological and innovative capabilities, managerial competencies, and professional expertise, as well as poor governance and accountability. Do we need a different theoretical framework? All the MNEs are not equal. They differ according to their size, the source and destination country, and the sector they operate in. Though it is believed that they evolve gradually from small, simple structures to increasing cross-border intensity and complex organizations, but the initial conditions differ for the MNEs originating from the developing and developed countries. However, Narula 2012 pointed out that the basic principles behind a firm becoming an MNE are the same for MNEs from developing as well as the developed economies. He says that the internationalization process of the MNEs requires knowledge assets, and the ability to be competitive in overseas market depends on acquiring, maintaining, and developing these firm-specific assets. Apart from it, the home country plays a significant role in constraining and defining the kinds of assets an infant MNE possesses, and because these initial conditions vary considerably between home countries, there are inevitable differences in the early internationalization of MNEs from different home countries. But the necessary assets and the principles upon why internationalization takes place are no different from their advanced economy counterparts. Heimer 1960 analyzed the vertical and horizontal expansions of the firms in a foreign location. Vertical expansion occurs when the firm locates assets or employees in a foreign country with the purpose of securing the production of a raw material, component or input, that is backward and vertical expansion, or the distribution and sale of a good or service, that is forward vertical expansion. The firm's engage themselves in a vertical expansion due to the presence of a comparative advantage in the foreign location. This advantage can be in terms of prices or productivities of factors of production such as capital, labor and land. On the other hand, the horizontal expansion occurs when the firm sets up a plant or service delivery facility in a foreign location with the goal of selling in that market and without abandoning production of the good or service in the home country. This type of expansion sometimes becomes inevitable due to protectionist barriers, high transportation cost, unfavorable currency exchange rate shifts or requirements for local adaptation to the peculiarities of local demand and make exporting from the home country unfeasible or unprofitable. In case of MNEs from emerging economies, it is generally stated that they choose the vertical expansion in order to reduce uncertainty and risks. However, the MNEs from emerging economies are less likely to choose the path of horizontal expansion because they do not possess better intangible assets as compared to the MNEs from the developed countries. Thus, the MNEs from the developing countries struggle hard to attain the competitive advantage as well as the intangible assets for enhancing their capabilities. The MNEs from developing economies can readily use their homegrown competitive advantage in other developing counterparts. But when they enter more advanced countries, they are likely to expose themselves to the cutting edge demand and therefore they need to develop their capabilities. These firms may evolve in a way that helps them to upgrade their capabilities or gain geographical reach or both. This process can be understood with help of figure. In figure, we have taken the geographical reach on the x-axis and the extent of capabilities on the y-axis. Along the diagonal, the firm pursues a balanced growth path. The area above the diagonal shows that a firm enters the region of capability building in which the firm sacrifices the number of countries entered, that is the geographical reach, so as to close the gap with other competitors, especially in the advanced economies. Below the diagonal, the firm enters the unsustainable region because prioritizing global reach without improving firm competencies jeopardizes the capability upgrading process. But the MNEs from the developing economies need capability upgrading and gaining global reach simultaneously, whereas entering developing countries helps them gain size, operational experience and generate profits through venturing into developed ones. They can upgrade their capabilities, but at the same time they have to face tough competition in the developed markets. The ideal strategy is that they should move along the balanced path along the diagonal, that is, they should be working simultaneously on extending their market and upgrading their capabilities. As they catch up established MNEs, they begin to invest more in developed countries. Internationalization strategies of MNEs from the developing economies. It is generally observed that the MNEs from developing countries suffer from the lack of assets such as advanced technology, R&D facilities, talented human capital, managerial expertise and natural resources. Therefore, these MNEs try to acquire these critical resources through international expansion, which is exploratory as well as exploitative in character. Here, exploratory expansion refers to firms move abroad to acquire new assets which are hard to secure in their home countries, while for exploitative expansion, the firms leverage the existing advantages to invest in other countries with the aim of achieving market success. Under exploratory expansion, firms are likely to use cross-border acquisition, while for exploitative expansion, these MNEs try to use strategic alliance, joint venture or licensing. In any case, the MNEs from the developing economies have to dynamically develop their competitive advantages in the global market, which is significantly influenced by internal R&D efforts, external networks and institutional advocacy. Internal R&D efforts. It is widely recognized that in-house R&D capacity and its existing level represents a firm's ability to develop and improve its new products as well as to modify it to fit the firm's specific processes. In general, firms will devote more R&D resources when they are sure of the linkage between more R&D input and more R&D outputs. Under the prevalence of risk and uncertainty, it is difficult for firms to engage in R&D activities without sufficient financial subsidizations. The developing countries' MNEs generally use a mixed expansion strategy, which is like learning by doing. It is likely that they use exploitative expansion to probe the global market and then aggressively acquire their targets via exploratory expansions. Acquiring these assets improves the ownership advantage of the firms. External networks. Developing inter-organizational collaborations with external partners are important for successful flows of knowledge, which subsequently affect a firm's innovative strategies and their outcomes. These collaborations can be with the research organizations such as universities, research institutes, technical institutes, etc., as well as other MNEs within the country or outside the country. Through cooperating with research organizations, these MNEs can not only take the advantage of advanced scientific and technological knowledge pools, but also strengthen their own in-house R&D capacities. Business ties with other MNE partners help the developing country MNEs overcome their deficiencies in knowledge about global market. With such business ties, the exchange of high quality and diverse information becomes possible, which helps these MNEs in learning sophisticated manufacturing techniques and understand new product offerings, resulting in more efficient and effective knowledge absorption. Thus, the developing countries' MNEs are likely to leapfrog to overseas market for acquiring more advanced technological knowledge with strong ties with their partners. Institutional advocacy. Institutional framework is very important for determining the speed, direction and timings of the internationalization process of MNEs, whether they belong to the developing economies or the developed ones. The institutional environment largely depends upon the home country's prevailing policies regarding support to the MNEs. The governments can grant a firm access to favorable financial resources for experimentation and in gaining access to other knowledge resources. Government support makes a significant impact on the process of technological learning, which affect a firm's interactions with international community by regulating the inflow of foreign technology. They affect the firm's interactions with the domestic community by influencing the availability and efficacy of local supporting institutions and the quality of educational institutions. And they also affect the firm's interaction with the market environment by shaping industrial organizations. These policies thus affect directly or indirectly the process of technology development and hence the competitive advantage of the firm. Recent trends. Even though the FDI outflows are still dominated by the MNEs from developed countries, but the MNEs from the developing countries are registering a remarkable growth in terms of investment as well as sales. Latest World Investment Report of 2015 shows that out of 20 largest MNEs, 9 were from the developing countries. Actually, the rise of global FDI outflows over the past 3 decades has been remarkable. Since 1980 to 85, when global FDI outflows averaged roughly US $50 billion per year, FDI outflows have grown by a factor of 40 to surpass 2.1 trillion US dollar in 2007. In 2008, due to the financial crisis and global economic downturn, global FDI outflows fell by roughly 10% to 1.9 trillion US dollar. The latest trends have shown that these outflows were 1.3 trillion dollar in 2012, which increased to 1.4 trillion dollar in 2013. But if we disaggregate these outflows by the level of development of the economies, we can observe that the outflow by MNEs from the developed economies have actually declined, while that of the developing economies has increased. The FDI outflows by MNEs from the developed countries declined from $873 billion in 2012 to $823 billion in 2014. On the other hand, in case of MNEs from the developing countries, These outflows have increased from $357 billion to $468 billion during the same period. These trends have changed the relative shares of the MNEs of the developing economies in the global FDI outflows. During this period, the relative share of the MNEs from the developed countries in the global FDI outflows has declined from 68% to 60.8%, while that of the MNEs from the developing countries increased from 27.8% to 34.6%. Thus, the developing economies now account for more than one-third of global FDI outflows, up from about just 1/10 in 2000. But it should be kept in mind that for the MNEs from the developing economies, the mode of entry and the source of investment is very important, particularly when they decide to enter a developed country market. As far as the source of investment is concerned, we can see from the World Investment Report 2015 that more than half of the FDI outflows by developing economy MNEs were in equity, while developed country MNEs continue to rely on reinvested earnings, the share of which increased to a record 81% of their FDI outflows. However, it is being felt that the equity financed flows are more likely to result in new investments and capital expenditures than are reinvested earnings, which may result into further accumulation of cash reserves in foreign affiliates. On the other hand, we can also find that the main mode of entry is being considered to be cross-border M&A activity. Between 2013 and 2014 alone, the value of cross-border mergers and acquisitions in developed economies increased by 16% and those in developing and transition economies by 66%, while the investment in greenfield projects has remained less buoyant, especially in the post-crisis period, that is after 2007. After a first rebound in 2013, the total value of announced greenfield investment declined slightly by 2%, remaining close to the $700 billion level of 2013. The gross value of cross-border M&A deals increased in 2014 by 34%, reaching $900 billion, which is considerably above the annual average of $775 billion for the period 2010 to 2014. Under such conditions, the MNEs from developing economies are also increasing their involvement in cross-border M&A operations. The share of these MNEs in total and net value of cross-border M&As rose from about 10% in 2003 to almost 40% in 2014. But up to 2013, about 70% of these acquisitions were in other developing economies and only 28% in the developed economies. In 2014, MNEs from developing economies are becoming more active directly in developed economies as well. In 2014, some 32% of M&A acquisitions by these MNEs targeted developed economies. On the other hand, in greenfield projects, the developing economies dominate. Yet, at the global level, announced greenfield FDI projects declined slightly in 2014, and this decline is similar in both developed and developing economies. Actually, over the last 10 years, the announced value of greenfield projects from developed country MNEs has been essentially flat, with a compound annual growth rate, that is CAGR, of -1%. While the same value for developing economies has increased steadily at a CAGR of 5% despite the financial crisis. As a consequence, developing economies have increased their share in the global value of greenfield FDI projects from 20% in 2005 to 30% in 2014. Thus, we can say that although the landscape of foreign investment is still dominated by the MNEs from the developed countries, but those from the developing world are also heading fast. We can have a quick look at the recent trends of internationalization process of 100 largest MNEs worldwide and those from the developing economies. We can see in this table that during the last 2 years, The trends of internationalization of the MNEs activity have been positive in case of all aspects with assets, sales as well as employment. In case of 100 largest MNEs in the world between 2012 and 2013, the assets have increased by 4.8%, the sales by 4%, while the employment declined by 0.7%. Since in each case, the growth rate of the domestic component has been much higher that of the foreign one, this has led to a slight decline in the share of foreign sales as well as employment out of their respective totals. We can also observe from this table that for developing and transition economies, MNEs growth rates of assets, sales and employment, both domestic and foreign, are higher than for their developed country counterparts. These MNEs have registered a growth of 9.1% in case of assets, 9.3% in case of sales and 3% in case of employment between 2012 and 2013. Even though the growth of the domestic assets and employment are greater than that of their foreign counterparts, yet the share of foreign component has not changed out of their aggregate values. It is only in case of sales that the share of foreign component has declined by 1 percentage point in 2014 as compared to 2013. Still, a comparison of the MNEs from the worldwide and the developing economies shows that the achievements of the latter in each case is less than half of the former, and this proportion is much lower in case of their foreign operations. Role of government in the process of internationalization of the MNEs. The government support is very important and influential factor driving the internationalization of MNEs. Overall, a positive association can be found of all the indicators of internationalization with the government support. Home governments often play a key role in outward FDI activities by providing favorable policies, financial support and government connections in host countries. The motivation of the policymakers is not restricted to the sales of product but also for strategic assets and technical collaborations. They provide support not to lower the perceived environmental risks and boost the confidence of firms in their overseas investment activities and in pursuit of greater control in foreign market entry. It is generally found that the firms with government support in the home country are more likely to adopt the equity modes than the non-equity modes while entering the foreign markets. SMEs in the emerging economy have scant resources for dealing with immense environmental variations. In any new environment, there exist relatively high levels of information, asymmetry and the risk. Entering into unfamiliar markets is a challenge for the firms from emerging economies, especially when the new market. Lack of international experience combined with the severe shortage of reliable foreign market leads the SMEs to depend upon the government support. Governments often provide critical information helping firms reduce the risk and uncertainty inherent to the international operations. High levels of government support subsidies and other benefits help firms to offset the disadvantages of newness and the foreignness. There are many studies which have indicated that the firms with greater support from the home government have a higher level of risk tolerance despite greater transaction cost and greater risks caused by the low institutional quality and cultural distance. The home government generally bails them out if they succumb to these risks in the international market. Recently, the rise of Chinese MNEs has drawn the attention of all the governments of emerging economies. The Chinese government has supported its MNEs by series of policy tools such as low interest rate, favorable exchange rates, reduced taxation and subsidized insurance for expatriates to facilitate outward FDI by Chinese firms. In order to be selected to participate in global value chains, the global production networks, developing countries' firms need to possess significant technological capabilities, which means they must have already gone through a certain process of capability building. In capacity building in the home economy, the role of the government is very important. We can cite several examples of successful MNEs competing in the global market, but in nearly all cases, the government policy and support is found to be playing a critical role in upgrading and internationalization of domestic enterprises. For example, in case of Taiwan province of China, there is a program of capacity building through the development of national technology systems. The government used the policy process to link and adjust its technological infrastructure to technological changes occurring in the global economy and to the needs of the large number of indigenous and export-oriented MNEs in Taiwan province of China. For this purpose, the several institutional agencies such as Investment Promotion Agency, Science and Technology Institute, Export Marketing Agency, Cluster Supporting Agency, etc. were geared up to enhance the capacity building and competitiveness of the firms operating abroad. Thus, for governments of developing countries, there are both challenges and opportunities in the present structure and features of the global manufacturing operations, and hence the support by government by adopting suitable policies is very important for increasing the degree of internationalization of the MNEs. Let us summarize what we have learned from this module. Although the developed world is more endowed with gigantic sized corporations, which have their assets more than even the GDP of some countries, yet the trends of globalization during the last 25 years have shown that the companies or corporations of the developing countries are also trying to mark their niche in international business scenario. These MNEs from the developing world are heading fast than their counterparts from the developed world, but still they are in relative disadvantageous position as compared to the MNEs from the developed countries. These MNEs suffer from the lack of assets such as advanced technology, R&D facilities, talented human capital, managerial expertise and natural resources. Hence, they have to dynamically develop their competitive advantages in the global market, which is significantly influenced by internal R&D efforts, external networks and institutional advocacy. It is being felt that much depends upon the home economy's prevailing policies regarding support to the MNEs. The governments can grant a firm's access to favorable financial resources for experimentation and in gaining access to other knowledge resources. Government support makes a significant impact on the process of technological learning, which affect a firm's process of internationalization through increased competitiveness. The recent developments in case of global FDI show that although the FDI outflows are still dominated by MNEs from the developed countries, but the MNEs from the developing economies are registering a remarkable growth in terms of investment as well as sales. Thus, the developing economies MNEs now account for more than 1/3 of global FDI outflows, up from about just 1/10 in 2000. These MNEs are on path of improving themselves on each aspect of internationalization with assets, sales and employment. But still, the race is among the unequal and these MNEs have to improve a lot to converge with the MNEs from the developed world.